Welcome to Strategy Sessions by Thirsty Bandit Consulting, Episode 24, The Cultural Impact of Wine.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Strategy Sessions. As always, this is Corey Kraychek, and I'm joined by Rachel Brown. Rachel Brown, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay, hanging in.
Seasonal allergies and sinuses are all the rage these days.
Yep, it's running amok right now. So I have been drinking more tea than I probably ever consumed in my life.
Well, it's an important tool in fighting the good fight, and we hope that you continue to be on the up and up. And as usual, though, you were a trooper in joining us today for episode 24 of Strategy Sessions. We're continuing a theme, Rach, in season 2, where we're pulling new and exciting people from industry, both in industry and out of industry, to talk about topics that we've been really passionate about over the last year on the show. And I have another surprise guest for you today that you have had the pleasure of meeting. Although I think that you'll really love a lot of what this guest has to say. Today's guest is Rod Phillips. He's a historian. He's a author. He's a wine judge. He's a professor. He's a wine writer. And a lot of the work that he does explores this deep cultural history that wine has and the role it has in society. And so, I mean, you and I know, I mean, we're sold, right? We've been sold on the importance that wine plays in society forever, for as long as we could pick up a glass of wine. But Rod's really written extensively about this, and really how wine's evolved to become a daily staple and an important part of social life. And actually, your book, Rod, just came today, or actually earlier this week, the Wine, Social and Cultural History, the drink that changed our lives. So I can't wait to dive into that, because I've long been fascinated with this role and the role that hospitality plays more broadly on how it can bring people together. And I think, and we've written about this and we've talked about it because we're in this digital era, and so much of our lives happen through screens these days. I still think wine has that remarkable ability to create moments for conversation and shared experiences and community. And really, that's what I'm hoping that we can achieve today with our conversation with Rod. So, Rod, welcome to Strategy Sessions.
Thanks very much, Corey and Rachel. I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, I don't know about seasonal allergies, but I'm looking up obviously you're further south than I am because I'm looking out my window, it's snow on the ground. So no seasonal allergies here, except for the seasonal allergy to winter.
Right. I think we all developed an allergy to cold weather for this season. We had a particularly long winter on the East Coast. And we're still in that crazy time period where you have these wild temperature fluctuations. And as we know, and being in the industry, this is also a really tricky time period because, you're right around the corner from bud break with your vineyards, and you're also worried about what kind of frost damage has occurred over the winter months. And so a lot will be revealed, and a lot of sort of waiting and hoping to get past Mother's Day is really occurring right now,
right.
As we talk to our friends and growers that are out there. So Rach, let me tell you really what inspired our chat today and what inspired me to reach out to Rod. So I recently read an article, I think in January, actually, The Economist, decided to cover the wine industry, which I thought was amazing. Well, amazing to a degree. I mean, it's also just because what the industry as a whole is experiencing right now is a market reset and some historical challenges that we're seeing. But the title of this article was A Vintage Slump. And it associated the falling wine sales that we're seeing with a march towards a more lonelier, atomized world, right? I mean, we've talked about the loneliness epidemic. We've talked about how people are socializing less, and so this article started to kind of equate some of the market indicators to the social habits. And so in the article, Rod was quoted about how wine had become embedded in the social habits of the middle class during the 20th century. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. We've never had a historian on the podcast before. I'd love to get some context, and that's really where I'd love to start the conversation today. So, Rod, I mean, I'd love to kick things off, just from your perspective. What cultural and economic forces really made wine such a natural part of everyday social life during that period?
Yeah, I think it. I mean, you can look back at obviously thousands and thousands of years of wine production and wine drinking, and you can see that at various times wine has been an important part of social interactions and social gatherings and that kind of thing. If you go back to ancient Greece, I mean, they have the symposia, which is it's an all male nighttime, all night actually, all night. Basically, it's a drinking session, but the wine was diluted so that people didn't get drunk. They just stayed pleasantly sociable from late at night until the next morning. And so wine was very important there, not just as to socialize people, or to allow people to socialize rather, but there's a kind of a rite of passage for younger men to go to their first symposium and be adults for the first time. Um, and it also set off the upper classes from the lower classes who weren't drinking good wine. They were drinking, stuff that had been made from the dregs of winemaking mixed with a bit more water, and then, God knows, seawater and lead and spices and herbs and so on. So, this idea that wine brings people together is has a very, very old lineage. But I think in the 20th century we get something approaching something. It's not mass consumption of wine, but we get much more broad consumption of wine in terms of social groups. And really, what you see from the end of the Second World War is the growth of the middle class. In the United States, this is all to do with the growth of suburbs, and people having their own house, a car, a pet, and that sort of thing. And socializing went along with that, in particular kind of a middle class socializing where families got together, they went and they had a drink or a meal with other families. And this was it's not absolutely new, but I think it's the emphasis on that was quite new from the 1950s and 60s onwards. um Now, wine wasn't always involved in this. People drank martinis, people drank beer, but wine became increasingly important. And when you look at the history, not only of North America, but you look at the history of other parts of the world as well. I'm from New Zealand, and when I grew up, no one drank wine. But I mean, now wine is really 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 important, and as the wine industry's grown. So I think wine just became much more important among the various alcohols that were available from the 1960s, 1970s onwards, and then I think there's a new push from the 1990s, late 1990s, and through to to the present, or almost to the present, where wine became a lifestyle beverage in a way that beer hadn't been. I think beer also became a lifestyle beverage, but it wasn't before. It was just a drinking beverage, right? But it became a lifestyle choice, and I think that's where we see it. I mean, it's always important to recognize that wine is just one of the beverages, one of the drinks that people choose to socialize with. That a lot of people still prefer a beer over wine, and we can see that spirits like cocktails are becoming much more important as well. So, but I think that what we can see then is that in the last 50 years or so, we can see that wine really increased its profile in the portfolio of beverages that people choose from.
I love that you bring up, you pull from ancient Greece to start. And I actually, I chuckled when you were talking about the dilution of the wine, because we're even seeing that now with consumer trends with low ABV cocktails, right? Session wines, session beers, wines that are meant to still give you the experience, but maybe allow you to have a little bit more and stay a little bit longer than before. And the fact that these concepts existed thousands of years ago and not just in recent time, and then you align that with the lifestyle component to this, and these are not very new. These are not very new recent phenomenon.
No, and I think we're going to probably see more of that too. I mean, I think there's a a preference for lower alcohol wine. Obviously, de-alcoholized wine and non-alcoholic beverages are becoming much more important. But I think people are looking for lower alcohol. I mean, when I started drinking, typical alcohol was around 12%,
Mhm.
and obviously Rieslings and others were well below that. But as you've just seen things climb up to 14% is pretty common, 14.5, and then if you look at Zinfandel, of course, you're shooting up into the high teens.
Sure.
And I think there's been a reaction against that, which is part of the general reaction against alcohol. But when you're looking at wine, of course, wine is alcoholic. I mean, it does contain alcohol, but then you make a decision to choose a wine that has less alcohol than others.
Mhm.
So I think I mean you're quite right to make that connection, which I hadn't made, between diluting wine to enable you to drink more and just simply choosing lower alcohol options.
Well, I think this kind of fits into, right? Like we're seeing declines in consumption, like in younger markets, like younger drinkers, they're steering away from this now. So from your perspective, like are we witnessing like a cyclical change of how wine fits into society, or is this something that you think maybe is more structural?
Well, I, I'm a historian, and the future is really not part of what I do, but I never mind speculating about the future like everyone else. And I would say it's structural. I don't think this is cyclical. And the reason I say that is that when you look at the reasons why people are turning away from alcohol, it tends to be primarily for health reasons. And if you look at the surveys, you can see that if you just look over the last 20 years, you can see that the people who are concerned about alcohol and who think that alcohol is bad for them has pretty much doubled in the last 20 years. So, younger people, maybe a third 20 years ago thought that alcohol was bad for them. Today, two-thirds. When you think of older people like me, uh, 20 years ago, about a fifth thought it was bad, and now one-third. But that's one-third compared to two-thirds of young people. So it's young people have really taken on board the warnings about alcohol, the health warnings about alcohol. And I know that, within the wine industry, there's a lot of debate about, well, how valid are these surveys and these medical studies? Um, you know, I personally am, I'm quite sure that even if I don't know whether drinking, 5 glasses of wine a day, I don't know what it's going to do to me, but I am convinced it's not good for me. There are no health benefits to come from this. And I think, and if there are, and some people say, well, under certain circumstances, there may be a lower risk of certain cardiac diseases if you drink moderately. Um, but I think overall, for the population as a whole, it's not good. And so people are taking this on board, but younger people especially are taking it on board. So my sense is that unless young people, in their 20s who are not drinking so much, um, once they get into the 30s, they change their minds and say, look, I've just lost a decade of drinking and I'm going to make up for it now. Uh, then things will change. But my sense is they won't, because I don't think the advice on alcohol and health is going to change. I don't think there is going to be suddenly a rash of surveys showing that alcohol is really good for you, and the more you drink, the longer you'll live, and the healthier you'll be. And then I think that this is Gen Z that we're talking about largely. I think the generation that comes after Gen Z will, I mean, if they adopt the same attitudes towards alcohol and health, then you'll have these two big cohorts coming on strong. And then people like me, I'm a baby boomer. I mean, I'm gonna die. People like of my age are gonna die, and then our our higher drinking behavior will just drop off the chart at the other end. So what we're going to see is this movement across the age structure of low alcohol consumption people coming in at the bottom, and then higher alcohol consumption people like me falling off the top. And that's just going to be a huge transformation in drinking behavior. Now, I mean, anything could happen. I mean, there are other things come into why people aren't drinking so much. Affordability is one. I mean, alcohol is expensive. So, I mean, if people, if unemployment drops, especially among young people, if the economy booms and people are earning well, then that may not be a barrier to drinking. So that could change. But my sense is the underlying rationale that people have for not drinking or not drinking so much is health, and I just don't see it changing. I think the analogy is tobacco, right?
Sure.
I mean, people, there's no evidence out there that tobacco is really good for you, and people aren't starting to smoke that haven't smoked before, and I think we're seeing the same thing. I mean, I think it's tough for the wine industry. I mean, I understand that and they don't. Many of them don't want to accept it, but it's not about trying to get people to drink more wine by telling them it's delicious or telling family stories and they come over October. I mean, all of this, because all of that. I mean, the people who are advocating these sorts of things say we need to get people to drink more wine, but in fact, the people that you're talking to hear that as we want you to drink more alcohol, and that's different, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol is not. It's not exceptional. Wine is not exceptional. It's an alcohol, but people in the wine industry like to think that it's somehow exceptional, and I think it's a bit of a problem that it kind of gets in the way of solutions.
Sure. No, it's a fascinating perspective, and I honestly I love that you're coming at it from that angle. I mean, at the start of this podcast, I referenced the fact that the industry was experiencing a reset moment, and I share in the feelings that you have, in the sense that I don't think we're going to ever see the numbers that we saw towards the early part of the, during the pandemic and prior
Right.
to the pandemic, as far as alcohol consumption. Probably, certainly not in my lifetime. And I do think a lot of it stems from health and wellness related issues. I found it interesting that at the beginning of this year, in the States, the federal government made it a point in January to call out that, social drinking, there's more of a benefit to socializing. And if it happens to be with moderate consumption, the benefits outweigh any potential health risks if you're sitting in your basement and not interfacing with anybody and not drinking, right? So I think that there'll be a bit of a balancing that will occur, but like we know, everything in life done in moderation is probably the key. The other part, though, that I think is so interesting is you're absolutely right. Tobacco has been public enemy number one for a very long time when we're talking about things that people use or take that harm themselves, that have been social. But I think that wine in particular, but alcohol to a bigger degree, and its relationship with food and the flawed nature of our current food systems will be an interesting thing to watch, because I think a counter argument could be that we all know how terrible burgers and fries are for us, yet there's the highest demand that there's ever been for those foods, right? So I think that probably somewhere along the way, alcohol and food need to figure out what the ultimate message is going to be, take their losses, and figure out what the new level of expectations are going to be within in a world that's far more educated about health and wellness than anyone in the history has ever been before. And I'd like to kind of pivot and go on the offensive for a second. So we all in this room recognize that there's an issue, it's not going away, and there's no quick fix or marketing ploy that's going to change it. But for producers and restaurants and hospitality leaders and anybody that's in the business of alcohol or in the business of wine, that are really trying to still actively engage new audiences, are there any lessons from history that we can glean that might help them design experiences that could remind them why wine's been a social connector? I know you called out the Come Over October, and for those that are listening that are aware of that, I mean that's an initiative to facilitate social activity during the month of October, and that's mostly in California. Is that a California initiative, Rod, or is that the entire?
Well, I mean, there have been echoes of it in Canada,
Oh,
for
okay,
sure. So
okay,
I don't know how. I mean, it was partly a counter to dry January, right?
right.
And I don't know how wide it is. I mean, dry January's become very popular, but I don't know about Come Over October. I mean, it's sort of, if dry January means don't drink during January, Come Over October sounds as if you should be drinking a lot in October. And I'm
Right.
not sure what the messaging. I'm not sure what the messaging is, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but it's in Canada for sure.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware that it had gone into Canada as well. So what's your thoughts? So anything from history, that a lesson that operators and people in the business right now should be thinking about, that could maybe teach us a lesson or two on how we can maybe
Well,
nudge.
I think it's a problem, obviously, that restaurateurs and bar owners and others have to think about it, retailers for that matter, and producers, obviously. I mean, how do you get people to drink more? And my sense is it's probably not a matter of getting people to drink more; it's a matter of just holding the line if you can, and
Yeah.
stopping the bleed. Um, and I'm interested. I was just talking to I have a class on the history of alcohol, and of course, and I was just talking to my students the other night about an episode in French history in the 1930s. It's called the Drink More Wine campaign, and they had a glut of wine because they had huge harvests between about 1931, 34, and the markets were very weak because Americans still had prohibition. So there was no exports to the U.S. The Brits had raised taxes, and then we're only 15 years after the First World War, and so many young men had died, and they were the drinkers. The export market was really, really bad for the French, so they got this idea of getting the French to drink more wine, and it was a huge campaign, and it included serving wine to children in school during recess or during lunch, but diluted wine, of course. Um, and they had this plan for the Tour de France, the cycle race every year, that
Yeah.
the cyclists should drink wine from the bottle as they cycle, to show, because they go through villages and people watch them, and they should demonstrate that wine is a good thing and good for athleticism, and so on. That didn't happen, but you can only imagine, right?
I would watch the Tour de France now if they brought that back. That would be
Yeah, but imagine
prime time viewing.
imagine the crashes on those tight roads. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it'd be awful. I mean, it'd be a disaster. Anyway, but they had all these plans. But one of them, but I mean, there is one. A couple. These are mad plans, but there was some. One of them was to have prefix menus. So menus where you have one price and you get to choose 3 courses and that kind of thing. Include wine on a prefix menu. I mean, French restaurants quite often will do it. It'll have like a quarter of a liter of wine with these 3 courses, and it's one price. So it's quite a good way of doing things, because first of all, a quarter of a liter is not that much wine, so you're not encouraging heavy consumption. You might say that's a nice amount to drink with a meal. I mean, I think it's a bit not quite enough, but you might say that's appropriate. So that's one strategy that people could use.
Sure.
But I think people need to be very very sensitive to their market, to their clientele, and I think they should be doing a lot of surveys amongst their clients. I mean, go to each table and talk to people at the table and say, what sort of wine would you like? What sort of wine would you like to see? Because I go into a lot of restaurants, and I look at the wine list, and I just see a whole lot of wines that I think, given the restaurant, shouldn't be there. I mean, they just don't seem appropriate at all. I mean, if you go into a fish restaurant, seafood restaurant, do you want Zinfandel? Do you want, big heavy reds when there's nothing appropriate on the menu? Now, it's
Yeah.
not to say that if you want to have shrimps and a glass of Cabernet, you shouldn't be able to. But if you can offer, like a sensitively organized wine list, and and one that's well priced as well. I mean, I know that's a real challenge these days. Um, but I think, rather than looking around at surveys and that sort of thing. I mean, you have your client base, and that's who you should be talking to.
Yeah. No, so, Rachel and I work a lot in this space, and
Right.
two of the areas that I feel are the most doable for operators are builds off of what you were just saying from a wine list perspective, which is ensuring that the wines that you are serving have a connection to the brand, making sure that your servers can speak to them with passion and understand why they're on the list and why they pair with foods that are on that list. I mean, if they're just there to be there, you're absolutely right. You're going to see increased sales with educated staff that can speak passionately about a much more condensed list than one that's much wider. And you're probably going to see increased sales from that. But that also sort of ties into this other piece, which has been the idea of experience and experiential programming is not a new term. But I would think, at least in my own personal experiences, I'd be interested to hear from both of you guys as well about this, that my association with wine and certain experiences is stronger than other beverages, right? I mean, there's been a couple that I'll associate beers with in certain times and places, but I mean, there are wines that I can remember distinctly of, where I was, who I was with, what we had. And I think that when you design for the moment, as opposed to just trying to get people to consume more generally, there's probably more success. So building experiences around wine so that there's an association. And I do think that that's probably a degree of what the Come Over October campaign is attempting to do on a broad scale. But as operators, I think thinking about those experiences and how can we develop something that's truly unique and make wine a centerpiece to this, and then people can associate those experiences with it, gives you a great opportunity to try to either get new adopters or get people that maybe have stepped away from wine for a while for other beverages, because we also know that the market is really oversaturated at this point with every other alcoholic beverage option under the sun, and show that there's sort of a significance to it that maybe they hadn't thought of before.
Right. Well, I mean, well, you know this. I mean, you work in this. You both work in this area, and I don't. So I'm a client, for the most part. And I certainly know, I know what my experience is in a restaurant, but I mean, I'm probably more finely attuned to it than most people, who go out and eat, because I'm very attentive to the temperature of wine and the service of wine, and just, what's on the list and that kind of thing. But I absolutely know when I'm being manipulated, and I and and I don't mind. I mean, I just know that, these are techniques for selling wine. So if someone, comes up to me and says, they start to take the order, and they say, "Oh, look, I've got this amazing wine that would go with that, and we're selling it by the glass. Let me bring you an ounce." I know I'm going to buy it. I know I'm going to get a glass of that, right? Because, I mean, what am I going to say? No, that I don't. I mean, no. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But for the most part, smart service of wine, smart selling wine in restaurants actually it pays off with me, and I'm a cynic about this, and
Yeah.
I can only assume that. I'm not saying other people are stupid, or naive, but I can only assume it would work better with other people. because
Yeah.
they're not all. I mean, as soon as someone says, "Oh, let me bring you this wine," my my antennas go up, and I'm thinking, "Oh, you're trying to sell me something you want to get rid of, right?" Um, um, and if it's good, I'll always buy it because I think I want to reward them for the effort that they're going to.
Yeah, well, especially if they're really working it, right? I mean,
Yes.
if you can feel the enthusiasm come through and that they're passionate about it, even if they really don't truly care, but if they make me believe that they care, then
Yeah.
I then want to reciprocate.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
love I love being able to do I feel like I mean I do that a lot, but I just love to just try to enrich. Like if you love it, that's great. If you want to buy it, that's great. But like I just genuinely like for me at least and being in the tasting room and training is like I just want to give you a good experience. Like you think you like this, let me bring you this. And like if you buy it, that's awesome. But I love to facilitate. And I think that's part of like what you're saying about like what sticks with you and what kind of comes. I was literally just talking to my husband about this. We were in Oregon 3 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, do you remember the guy that took care of us at Adelsheim? He opened every single bottle of bubbly because I made one passing comment that I love sparkling wine. Did I buy the sparkling wine? 100%. Yes, I did. Did he take that and run? Yeah, I rewarded it. But I love the effort that comes with it to just kind of like take what can be a good experience and make it a little bit better.
So we have an upcoming podcast with a hospitality specialist who is working. She does a lot of training in SOP design for hotels and restaurant groups. So I mean, she's a very much like, um, by the book. Like this is how you deliver exceptional hospitality. But one of the interesting things that she's starting to train with professionals is understanding how to operate in the gray, understanding when to deviate from SOPs in order to deliver a memorable experience. So again, maybe you've been instructed that, from a cost savings perspective, that we're only giving each person 1 ounce pours and they get 5 1 ounce pours or 3 1 ounce pours, and that's it. But you are missing opportunities if you're not able and you don't have the flexibility to operate in that space to go above and beyond. I mean, this is the unreasonable hospitality concepts that Will Guidara and 11 Park Madison and all those guys are, have been widely known for. But I think it's an interesting contrast sometimes when you think of sort of some of the structural parameters that hospitality and tasting bar workers have to function in, being
Right.
able to read and react and deliver that. But unless you evolve and adapt to that, then your numbers are going to continue to decline because of
Yeah.
everything you pointed
Yeah.
out on.
Yeah. No, I think it's a real challenge, isn't it, to restaurateurs and bar owners and everyone to adapt to new conditions, and it's not just about getting people to drink more. I mean, it is obviously holding the line, stopping the further loss, and maybe bringing other people in, because there will be people coming into restaurants who don't want to drink alcohol, but who are not dead set on drinking alcohol, but can be persuaded to have a glass or 2 ounces or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I wouldn't want people to feel pressured to drink alcohol at all. That's just going to drive people away. But I think there are things that people can do. Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's interesting too, like you look at history and how it's gone. Wine has gone through a lot of cultural cycles over the centuries, necessity, status symbol, everyday, like social rituals. So if you can kind of look ahead to the next 20 years, what role do you think wine will play in how people gather and how they experience their community? And then I guess the follow up to that is for those of us that are in wine and in hospitality, what can we kind of be thinking about to help shape that future?
yeah. I thought, yeah. I mean, it's so difficult to say. I mean, uh, I have this, as I said, this course on the history of alcohol. I've got about 130 students, and just from my sense of their relationship to alcohol. I mean, we do a little alcohol tasting in class, and I think everyone takes some. Um, but I suspect that a lot of them don't drink on a regular basis at all, if they drink at all, and most of them are pretty moderate in their drinking. I think I don't know for sure, but I suspect a lot of them use marijuana products instead. I mean, marijuana is legal in Canada. So that's taken a bit of a bite out of the alcohol market for sure. But they're concerned about health, and I just think, well, they're about 20 now. They're 20 years of age, 21. What are they going to do for the next 20 years until they reach middle age? Where is alcohol going to be in their lives? Where's wine going to be in their lives? And I suspect that probably a minority of them, I don't know, will drink wine. But I don't think they're going to drink wine, on a daily basis. I think it's going to be on a social basis, maybe, maybe a Saturday night or when you go out for a meal. I mean, but because going out for a meal is in decline, just because of cost. But I think it's going to be a much it's going to have a lower profile than it has had over the last 20, 30, 40 years. I think people are going to be more selective in their wine. I mean, it tends to be, when you're using less of something, you tend to be more selective about the kind of thing that you use. And I suspect that people are going to be more selective about the wine they drink, which probably means they're going to want to learn more about it. So there are opportunities here for education, even though, we're talking about a lower level of consumption. We might want to raise the level of education at the same time, just because I think that's going to be important. As if you're drinking less, you may want to drink better, but you certainly want to know what it is that you're paying for. And I think that some kind of broad education is going to be important there as well. I think we do, when you get to education, I think we need to get away from the kind of very technical education that people offer, to a very general kind of education that's very much geared to the enjoyment of wine. What is it in wine that gives you pleasure, and enable people to be able to describe the wine that they take pleasure from. I mean, if you ask people now, what kind of wine do you like? They have great difficulty explaining. They say, well, I don't know. I don't like wines that are too sour or too sweet, or too red, that kind of thing. I mean, it's not very helpful to a wine person, quite often, to know what they're what people are talking about. I often use the apple analogy. I say there are many, many varieties of apples. I mean, go to a grocery store, you've probably got 20 different varieties of apples to choose from. And I ask people what kind of apples they like. And if you like Honeycrisp or you like Granny Smith, well, if you like Granny Smith, you like acid. And if you like Honeycrisp, you like sugar. And so, I say, tell me the kind of apple you like, and I'll tell you the kind of wine that you probably like as well. So, I mean, there are ways of, getting into this that are sort of common sense, using analogies that people understand, because people aren't frightened of apples. People are frightened of wine, right? I don't want to make a mistake and order the wrong wine, but they don't care about buying the wrong apple. I mean, they're very happy buying apples.
I might have to borrow that apple analogy. That's pretty
Yeah, I love
solid.
it.
I have
Yeah.
a lot of training coming up for a client, and that might be something that I have to steal. So
Yeah,
I'll give you credit when I do, but that's
Nice.
that's cool.
No, I came up with it myself, and I've used it a lot, because I used to teach. I used to give wine classes, and I used to use that. And I used to bring apples along, like a Granny Smith and a Red Delicious or something like that, and people can taste the difference. And then I say, now try these wines, and there it is. There's the sugar, there's the fruit, and there's the acid, in different different balances. So I think I've got well away from your question. What's going to happen over the next 20 years? I think probably less alcohol consumption, but more targeted alcohol consumption, I think. And to help people target, they're going to have to know something about alcohol. But again, it's got to be friendly education. Too often you go into wine classes and it's just, honestly, it's so boring. Let me tell you the difference between straw-colored wine and, yellow-colored wine and that kind of thing. It's really nobody needs to know that.
Yeah, the quality over quantity proposition, right, will be in full effect over the next 2 decades. And
Yeah.
I love what you're saying about education, because we firmly believe in that. And then really a lot of the other things you pulled in are brand management 101. Come up with your unique value proposition,
Right.
and make it accessible to people. Make the social status, the social symbol of wine has contributed to its unprecedented growth, but now is also one of the reasons for its ultimate demise at this point.
Right.
So the industry has got to get out of its own way
Right.
and think more critically about all of these things, and that will be the best survival tactics,
Right.
in my opinion.
But it's going to be it's a huge sea change, right? For
Yes.
the industry. I mean, they've got to start thinking in new ways. And the old way is, we have to get people to drink more wine, and so we have to remind them of the story behind the wine and the family behind the wine. Well, that's not going to cut it.
Yep. Everyone has unique terroir and
Of course they do.
estate bottling and,
All generations and yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do after this call. I'm going to go call up the Tour de France and pitch them on an idea I have
Yeah.
on how they can get more eyes on the race and sell more wine at the same time. So,
Think about the Super Bowl.
right.
All these energy drinks.
Yep. It's
Right?
true.
Yeah.
Yep. Rod, this has been great. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes with us today and sharing some of your expertise in this field. I can't wait to dive into this book. Your class sounds amazing. Some of the stories, some of the historical context, really, I think it's always valuable for people to look back and see where we've been, as a people and as a culture. And there are always little nuggets that you can pull out of there and hopefully apply to present day. So it's been a real pleasure for us. Don't be a stranger, and hopefully we'll catch you at one of these functions one of these days, as you do the touring, and as do we. So one of these days, hopefully we'll run into each other and can have a glass of wine somewhere.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Corey. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and maybe we'll meet on a cycle track sometime.
That sounds great. Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Strategy Sessions. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for Strategy Sessions. Please like, follow, share, and subscribe at Thirsty Bandit Co.